Had there been an actual error, there would be text, there would be some coding and a text message here. You would want to record that text message. If there's a lot, you may want to print it on a black and white printer. And then, once you're done, go down to erase log. It would ask you if you wanted to continue. We would say, yes, we want to continue erasing that log. And then once we're done and the log is erased, we would go to our previous menu and come back to the main page. What this helps us do is that any errors that show up now we know are part of the current condition and not something that had happened before, maybe just a computer glitch or something of that nature. So once we have a clear error log, we'd come up, we'd run a basic test. The basic test would run about 5 minutes or 12 minutes or so. And at that point, again, if there were any errors, it would give you an asterisk in the log. We would go and now get a current readout of whatever errors were there. Below the basic test area, the next selection down is an extended basic. Now, this test we typically only use in extreme cases where we have intermittent problems that have been ongoing, can't really get a handle on what's going on, and so we want to interrogate the system a little more in depth. The reason why we only use this in those situations is because it will have a tendency to report all kinds of errors, even if they're inconsequential. It's just as though you're using your computer and every now and then it glitches or it doesn't quite bring up a screen quick enough. And so it would be a tendency to give a lot of misleading information and a lot of wasted energy in terms of trying to actually get a handle on diagnosing the machine. So this area is really not used very much. The next two coming down is the key processor test and scan converter test, and one below that is the scanner test. Now each three of these tests are subsets of the basic. So they're used in a situation where I want to specifically test that area of the machine and not get a global or overall picture of what's going on. So if you run the basic test, the key processor, scan converter, and scanner will already be included in that test, and there really would be no need to run it again. I'm going to skip the next one for a moment. We'll come back to that. Test setup. In this area, you can set the parameters of the test, and again, we don't really need to change that too much. Usually one test is enough. We accumulate all of the errors as opposed to the whole thing, and that's about it. So that's pretty straightforward. So the test setup is something that's usually prearranged and standard, nothing to do too much with that. The real-time error log, we just talked about that, and the system information is a little more extensive or more specific of the actual part number revision level type of information. Once you go into the system information, if you notice that in all of the previous menus, I've been able to go into the menu, exercise whatever it is I wanted to do, and then hit previous menu and return to the test page. Once you go into the system information page, you're kind of locked in there, and it has you recycle the entire process. So it'll go back to the imaging screen and then back into the test menu. So it's a little more cumbersome than it is worth. So we don't really do a lot with that as well, because we have some basic information here in the overall view of the system, and then as we see, we're going to go into the other tests and utilities, and there'll be some other information there. So just to recap, the most commonly used features on this drop-down page is our basic test, looking at and reading our error logs. And in this case now, we'll be going to other tests and utilities. This option is to calibrate the touch panels. This is usually done after some components in the controller area has been changed, and or if for some reason the trackball is not registering accurately to what you're seeing on the screen display. So you would select calibrate the touch panel, and it says, do you want to continue? We'll say okay. And it'll take a moment to switch over into the actual diagnostic process. When we're in our other tests and utilities, you can see that one of the first options, or the first option, is to calibrate the touch panel. We would do this in the case where on the plasma screen touch panel, if it was not responding to your touch or it was responding inaccurately. So we would highlight this test, hit the OK, and at this point we would go down to the actual plasma itself, and it would instruct you to say, just touch this portion. Touch, touch. It takes you over to the second screen, touch, touch, and now the screen is calibrated. It's that simple. So we can come back to our test panel, and this next test is quite handy. It's a control panel test, and basically when we select that, it will enable you to exercise all of the keys, switches, knobs, and controls to determine if the system is communicating correctly with the control panel. We won't actually go through that process right now. Suffice it to say that if you have a key that's not responding, we can go into the control panel test mode and exercise that key, and it'll tell you one of two things. If you see the proper response, that means that the key is actually communicating with the microprocessor or the CPU on the system, and the mechanical portion of it is actually functioning. And now there's some anomaly in the system preventing that function from actually taking place. So for example, if I were to change the 2D gain control, for example, and my 2D gain was not changing, I would go into this control panel test and see if the CPU recognizes the fact that I'm actually turning the gain control knob. If that is in fact happening, then we could suspect that there's something in the circuitry of the actual production of this gain that is at fault. If it's not responding, we can have something basically simple as a bad knob or a switch. So that would be the purpose of this control panel.